Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to one of our last few EBA hearings. We are going to start this afternoon with the Executive Department for the Governor. Scott Benson is our analyst. Fagan Harris, Chief of Staff, is here. Want to come up to the table? And you have with you Mona Vaidya. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Today I'll be presenting the analysis for the Executive Department Governor's Office. Now, the Governor exercises supervision over the state agencies of the executive branch and provides oversight, guidance, and coordination to various state agencies. Now, as you can see in the operating budget summary, the fiscal 2026 budget increases by $1.6 million, or 7% to $24.1 million. To note, there are two proposed deficiencies included in the fiscal 2026 budget that provide a net $403,712 in general funds. The first deficiency withdraws $76,288 for personnel expenses to transfer a position to the Governor's grant office. The second deficiency adds $480,000 for a federal government affairs contract to assist the Governor's Office of Federal Relations in advancing state priorities. As you can see in Exhibit 1 on page 3, the majority of the Governor's Office budget, 83% to be exact, consists of expenses related to personnel. Personnel expenses include the Governor and Lieutenant Governor's executive staff, advisors, and other personnel who assist with the daily functions of the office. As you can see in Exhibit 2 on page 4, the fiscal 2026 allowance increases by $1.6 million, with the largest increase in spending being due to salary increases and associated fringe benefits, increasing by $953,996. Other personnel-related spending includes an additional $506,307 for 3 new positions. Additionally, there's an increase of $436,984 in management studies, software licenses, and outside consultants for the innovation team within the Governor's Office. Moving on to personnel. As of December 31st, 2024, there were 13 vacant positions, with 2 of them being vacant for less than 3 months. The remaining vacancies, 3 have been vacant for less than 9 months, and 8 have been vacant for more than a year. 3 new regular positions have been added in the fiscal 2026 allowance. 1 position is intended to provide oversight and support for the Maryland's Office of Overdose Response and is supported with special funds. The other 2 positions are for a director and special assistants to lead the Government Modernization Initiative. Moving on to key observations. As you can see, there are a few upcoming activities for the innovation team. Now, the fiscal 2025 allowance had included a $2.15 million from the Bloomberg Philanthropies in order to create an innovation team. This team was to be comprised of 8 new positions that act as an in-house consultancy, working on state priorities of childhood poverty and economic mobility by collaborating with partners and internal and external stakeholders to solve challenging urban issues. Now, as of February 17th, 2025, 7 of those 8 positions have been filled, with the remaining position expected to be filled by the end of February 2025. In fiscal 2026, Bloomberg Philanthropies is providing $2.32 million for the innovation team. This additional funding will be used to support the launch of the team's initial project, which is intended to increase residents and small businesses' access to capital through the Maryland Community Investment Venture Fund, as well as build out and begin implementing additional research projects. The innovation team will continue to work with other agencies by providing capacity support and identifying new projects that align with its mission. And with that, we move on to the operating budget recommended actions. And DOS recommends two actions. The first is reducing 2 new positions and reclassifying long-term vacant positions. And the second is eliminating the deficiency appropriation for the federal government affairs contract. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take your questions.
Any questions of the analyst? Great job. Thank you. Mr. Harris, welcome.
Senator King, members of the subcommittee, I am Fagan Harris, Chief of Staff, Office of the Governor. With me today is Mona Vida, Director of Financial Administration. We thank you for the opportunity to appear before the subcommittee as you review the proposed budget. We would like to thank our assigned analyst, Mr. Scott Benson, for his thorough analysis of our budget. Our office has enjoyed working with him. Over the past year, the Moore-Miller administration has demonstrated bold leadership and decisive action, tackling some of Maryland's most pressing challenges, advancing a vision of opportunity and equity. At the core of our economic vision, this administration has introduced a pro-growth agenda focusing on industries of the future, such as life sciences, AI, cybersecurity, quantum computing, defense, and aerospace. In the wake of the Key Bridge collapse, the administration led a swift and coordinated response to reopen the port, provide financial assistance, and develop concept rebuild plans. Additionally, we've expanded global engagement, increasing communications with international partners, and welcoming His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan to discuss opportunities. Prioritizing the well-being of Maryland's youth, we've launched the Enough Alliance Fund, doubling down on our commitment to leverage new and diverse fund sources for the betterment of Maryland and advancing our mission of leaving no one behind. Amid the federal administration transition, the Moore-Miller administration has remained resilient, securing resources and partnerships to strengthen and grow Maryland's economy and workforce. Through these efforts and more, the Moore-Miller administration has continued to deliver on its promise of a stronger, more inclusive Maryland. If any questions arise this morning regarding the innovation team, please address the committee and request that you,
That's okay.
that's like an internal note.
Yeah.
Got it. I brought my innovation team colleague here. She's ready to get into anything you guys want to talk about. The following written testimony is provided on behalf of the Office of the Governor, and we'd like to begin on page 7 with the operating budget recommended actions. So this first recommendation, the Office of the Governor respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to reduce 2 new positions. To date, the Governor's office has 6 vacant positions in various stages of the recruitment process, all of which are expected to be filled by the end of March 2025. This administration has carefully evaluated the essential roles needed from the remaining 6 vacancies to ensure success with ongoing initiatives. Therefore, the additional positions are necessary to implement the Government Modernization Initiative, which is a new initiative that requires additional staffing. The Government Modernization Initiative is a critical effort to identify efficiencies across state agencies, ensuring taxpayer dollars are used responsibly and effectively. These positions will play a key role in streamlining government operations, eliminating redundancies, and modernizing outdated processes, all of which are necessary to play a part in closing the state's structural deficit. Furthermore, this initiative is designed to improve how state government interacts with constituents, making services more accessible, responsive, and efficient. The Governor's Office of Performance Improvement is leading the Government Efficiency Initiative to identify performance and cost inefficiencies in the delivery of state government services. In order to expand that office's role to include this initiative, we're requesting 2 additional staff to oversee these new activities. We believe the Governor's Office leadership is necessary to show commitment from the top to this important initiative. In addition, these cost savings will require cross-agency collaboration that the Governor's Office is uniquely positioned to drive. Finally, we believe these 2 new staff will be a high return on investment for the state, as these efficiencies, as they're implemented, will result in hopefully $40 million of net positive impact to the state's general fund. The second recommendation, in recognition of the current fiscal climate, we concur with the DLS recommendation for reducing the federal government affairs contract. This concludes our testimony. Thank you.
Nice job. Senator Bailey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just had a couple questions. What is the turnover rate that you have?
In the Governor's Office specifically?
Yes. Yep.
I want to say we're at 7% annually. It's very low.
Okay. No, when I mean turnover, I'm not talking about people leaving. I'm talking about the positions that you're holding vacant.
Oh, I think what do we have? 8 positions against 120 pens?
So we currently have 6 vacancies.
6 vacancies. So probably 5%.
Okay, and currently for balancing the budget, a lot of times different entities would hold certain positions vacant.
Sure.
Right, and I just didn't know when you said you were, so I was trying to get at what your actual turnover was that you were holding vacant versus what you were talking about filling. You have, so I think you have around 120 pins,
Yes,
is that
sir.
right? So when you talk about your filling, your intention to fill those and ask 2 more, so does that mean you're going to have 120, you're anticipating have 122 pins with no turnover?
Yes,
No,
sir.
holding nothing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, that was sort of what my question. And the, when you talked about the, when we talked about the grant that you had received last year.
Yes, sir.
That yielded, I think it yielded 8 positions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the status of those positions moving forward? Are they part of the 122 positions? So now the grant is over and we have encumbered
The grant
that.
is not over.
Grant continues for several more years.
So the money is continuing with them. I was just trying to
Yes.
figure out if then the taxpayers were picking up their salary
No.
or they were part of that grant.
They're part of that grant. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Senator Benson, any questions? I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you.
I almost got Francesca.
I was trying to think up a question, just,
It's very cool the work they're doing on the innovation team. So we look forward to giving you updates and maybe we can have Francesca.
that'd be great. Okay, we'll do that.
It's super worthwhile. It's helping us leverage tax dollars more efficiently. And we appreciate the time. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll move to the Historic St. Mary's City Commission. Elizabeth Weibel is our analyst. Dr. John Seidel, did I say that right? Executive Director.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be presenting the budget analysis for the Historic St. Mary's City Commission. The commission operates an outdoor museum, park, and archaeological site on the location of Maryland's first colonial capital city. The fiscal 2026 allowance increases by about $94,000 to $7 million. You'll see a breakdown of the budget on Exhibit 1 on page 2. Maintenance accounts for 23% of the budget. The commission is responsible for about 1,000 acres of property as well as buildings on the site, including a number of reconstructions of buildings from various periods of the settlement's history. So that accounts for 23% of the budget. Research archaeology makes up about 21% of the budget. And public programming and administration each make up another 21% of the budget. Exhibit 2 on page 3 shows the proposed budget change. Personnel expenses are the largest area of increase. The fiscal 26 allowance includes 7 contractual conversions in the budget, all for existing contractual employees who are being made regular personnel, which the commission believes will help with employee retention. There are also a few other areas that are areas of increase. There's some funding for consulting with the Piscataway tribe and some others to demonstrate and interpret some of the history of the site. A new visitor center, the Maryland Heritage Interpretive Center, is expected to open in spring or early summer of 2026. So a lot of work is being done now to prepare for that. Key observations begin on page 5. General admission increased slightly in fiscal 2024, as you'll see in Exhibit 3 on page 6. Recreational use of park was down, which the agency attributes in part to a better estimate of how many people are actually using the hiking trails, and also to the closure of the on-site bakery in July 2023, as well as days with excessive heat in the summer of 2023 when the park had to close. The number of school tours continues to be lower than pre-pandemic levels, and the commission is contacting schools to ask about why they haven't returned. Special fund revenues were also down, as shown in Exhibit 4 on page 7. These are revenues for things like ticket sales, site rentals, and donations, as well as in-kind volunteer services. And DLS has asked the agency to comment on its efforts to secure non-state sources of revenue. Key observation 3 on page 8 is about the implementation of recommendations from an audit which was conducted in March of 2023. The audit found a number of areas where the commission needed better oversight of cash management as well as more written policies and procedures. And in response to last year's JCR, the commission submitted a report confirming that it had implemented all 9 of the recommendations from the audit and included a lot of the documentation that had been developed as a result. The agency also conducted a confidential staff survey in the summer of '24 that found generally high satisfaction with the work itself and with the mission of historic St. Mary's City, but noted a need for more training and development opportunities. Our recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance, and you'll see that on page 9. That concludes my analysis, and I can take any questions you have.
Good job. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good
I guess it
morning.
is still morning.
It still is.
Thank you, Senator King, members of the subcommittee. It's a pleasure to see you again. For those of you I might not have met, I'm John Seidel, Executive Director of the Historic St. Mary's City Commission. And with me on behalf of the commission are, to my right, Admiral Tim Healy, who is chair of the commission. To my left, I've got Peter Carocchio, who is our Chief Operating Officer. And then there's our CFO, Doug Hunter, and followed by our new Director of Advancement and Communications, Mike Bellis. You have my written testimony, so I'll simply highlight several points and keep it brief. First, we concur with the governor's budget and the analyst's recommendations. It's been a real pleasure to work with Ms. Weibel, who asked a lot of great questions, visited the site, has been very thorough. We're well aware of the very tight financial situation facing the state, and we're therefore grateful for the level of support in the governor's proposed budget. I'd like to offer several observations that highlight the importance of operating support at this level. When I survey the landscape of living history museums across the country, a couple of things really stand out to me. First, Historic St. Mary's City has a truly remarkable set of resources. It has an archaeological record that is extraordinary and a history of stewardship and education that very few sites can match. The staff at the museum does cutting-edge archaeology. They're delivering award-winning educational and interpretive programs, and they're a national model. My second observation that is a corollary to that is that our museum accomplishes all of this with a very, very slender staff. I've laid out the numbers in my written testimony, but peer sites like Plymouth and Jamestown have anywhere from 4 to 7 times the staffing level that we have. Our most recent master plan in 2021 highlighted this challenge for us. It means that we need every single position that we have. Recruiting for staff vacancies and then retaining those people is absolutely critical to our operations. There's no slop there. This is a challenge. As you may know from our region, many of our neighbors in southern Maryland, Pax River Naval Air Station, the contractors and the businesses that have grown up around that base offer compensation packages that are significantly better than we can offer. And the problem's particularly acute when we look at our contractual staff who work for hourly wages with little in the way of benefits. It's very tough to recruit for those positions. It's often tough to retain people. And for that reason, the 7 staff conversions in this budget are enormously important to us. It makes these jobs much more attractive. PIN conversions and competitive wages are keys to our efforts to strengthen our ability to attract and to retain talent. So we couldn't be happier to see these in the proposed budget. Shifting gears, the budget analysis asks us to report on the steps we have taken to secure non-state funding. As I hope my written response makes clear, this is something we've thought deeply about and are actively working on. All of us at this table fully agree on the need to expand our funding base. I mean, to be blunt, non-state funding has not been adequately addressed at Historic St. Mary's City for a number of years. As a result, we are in a rebuilding period. We needed to hire specialized, experienced staff in fundraising. We needed to build the processes and the protocols for an active fundraising program. We needed to acquire software and other tools that allow us to well screen and to build donor, member, and volunteer databases. And we need to help the Historic St. Mary's City Foundation rebuild its board and its policies. So we're doing all of that. We have a good plan. We are executing it. But having said that, I really want to emphasize that rebuilding takes time. This is a big job. It's one that can't be done overnight, but we're absolutely committed to doing this work. And we know that building these resources while building out our capital programs are essential, really, to meeting our obligations relative to the coming 400th anniversary of the founding of Maryland in 2034. I'm very well aware that in hard financial times, witness after witness comes before you arguing that their programs will aid in economic growth and offer an important return on investment. I get that. But I will
You're
say
exactly
that
right.
if there was ever a case, though, a sound case to be made for this, I believe that it's at historic St. Mary City. Heritage tourism can be a huge economic driver. In my written testimony, I've offered you some numbers taken from elsewhere, including data from our peers in Virginia. As a native Marylander, someone who deeply loves and appreciates our heritage, I have to admit that our state has never done as good a job investing in that economic engine as some of our neighbors. Bluntly, Virginia eats our lunch and they reap the benefits. We want to change that. We need to change that. We're absolutely convinced that with the proper investments, we can leverage the coming 400th anniversary into a huge economic windfall for our region, and furthermore, diversify our regional economy, which is important. We're tremendously excited over our potential. We look forward to working with you to realize that. So, on behalf of all of our staff and the tens of thousands of Maryland citizens who visit us every year, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate your support and that of the Moore-Miller administration. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. You know, every time you all come before us, I think about, that was probably one of the most fun field trips. I had two kids that I rode the bus and went to St. Mary's from Montgomery County. And that was probably one of the best field trips that the kids got to take. So I always have a kind of a warm spot for St. Mary's.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just have a couple questions. Obviously, when I look at the decline in the fact of, visitors, right? I mean, that is definitely alarming to me. And I worry about that, going forward, thinking that, when I see, obviously my office, I have many groups very similar to you that come in, and I see that, that you had 35,000 visitors. And then, so we look at the money that we spend there, and I look at Amory Gardens, right, and Solomon's, and they have 100,000 more visitors a year than what you have. Right, and so I would be interested to know the plan moving forward, so that we know how we are going to be able to reap the benefits of the expense.
Sure. No, I appreciate that question. It's something that we are concerned with greatly. If you take a look at my written analysis, written testimony, part of what I've tried to do there is to outline, in talking about non-state funding, the revenue from admissions clearly is important. One of the things we've all experienced in the museum world, and it's no surprise, is a big decline after COVID-19. And we have compared ourselves to national data, to a variety of museums, including some of the best museums in the country. And what we have found is that we all suffered this decline. What is interesting to me is that the rebound in general admissions at Historic St. Mary City has actually exceeded that of many of our peers around the country. So we've bounced back. We've suffered a dip lately, I think, for a couple of reasons. As you know, one of the parking lots that many of our visitors use is right next to Farthing's Ordinary Complex. That was under reconstruction for more months than we would have liked. And I know that that depressed visitation, and we saw it in our numbers, we saw it real time. Another factor there was that there was a bakery, a food service in the Farthing's Ordinary Complex. We lost that vendor unexpectedly. And we have worked very, very hard to try and find a replacement. And we've got a great one, but we also found that once the original restaurateur had moved out and we started rehabilitating the thing, restoring it for the new service, we had mold, we had a lot of deficiencies, we had to bring the building up to snuff. So that too has taken a little bit longer than we would have liked. However, I think we have the finalization of that program. We've actually executed a lease, and we'll be able to open that in early summer, I hope. So at least it looks like that. So, the other part is school tours, as you pointed out. And as your experience shows, people really respond to that. Nationwide, there has been a decline in field trips. It is startling and it is concerning, I think. But it is a factor, well, it's a number of factors going into it. It is the fact that teachers have more demands on their time. They have fewer funds. In particular, they can't get transportation costs covered, and that's a challenge for us. If we want to draw students from all over the state of Maryland, we got a lot of kids that have to come some distance. We're exploring outreach to schools, trying to figure out what would make it more palatable, more attractive to them. We're trying to explore a travel fund so that we can offer funding to them. It will come from private sources. There are a number of things that we have to do, but we've got to drive those numbers up. And again, I think that with the new programming that we've got coming online, with the new Maryland Heritage Interpretive Center, I think we stand ready to really reap some benefits in terms of admissions.
So I appreciate your response, and thank you, Madam Chair. Could I have just another moment? Okay, thank you. So when you speak about school children, and it would be my hope that when we move forward and you're looking at putting, taking contractual people and making them pins, that the gentlemen, we're able to be open all year.
I'd love to do that.
That would be, if we are going to get paid and provide an income to employees that competes with businesses on the base, then we have to be open and available 365 days a year. Right? That's there's no sense of paying somebody if we're not going to be open for the visitors, right? And if we're open all year, I think, quite frankly, the visitation numbers are going to go up considerably, right? Especially if we're able to be there. But I know that there's been some struggle with. I know you got numbers from used to have a B&B that operated. There were some issues with mold. If you'd be so kind as to just to give us an update on how that is moving forward in that regard.
Sure. We were fortunate to get emergency funding to remediate mold from the Department of General Services. It has been, unfortunately, a slow process to get that done. We have had inspections done of 6 different properties. We have scopes of work for mold remediation. We have interviewed contractors. We're ready to go. Peter Carocchio can probably speak to exactly where we stand right now with regard to those, to moving forward with that, but I'm hopeful that it is imminent.
Good morning, Senator.
Morning.
Yes, we are very close to getting the mold remediation done for the Inn at Broome Howard, and you're familiar with the PR building, admin building, and the Hammett House. So those 4 buildings we're focusing on, and we feel that we should have the mold remediation done by no later than June of this year. As John had mentioned, it's just been a process that you have to go through step by step. Our partners at DGS have been great. They've been wonderful to work with, and we're very confident that we'll be able to get there.
When was that funding approved, emergency?
The emergency funding was, I believe it was last July. It
So
was
emergency
approved.
funding, and we're not going to be done for 11 months?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair and I are definitely going to intervene with DGS and find out why it has taken us 11 months for emergency funding to be able to move through. And my last question is just to make sure that, gentlemen, that you are keeping the Historic St. Mary's City Commission and the commission members involved in all of your discussions and the planning process, so those commissioners feel that they're part of the process and the process that we established to make sure that they're part of the process.
Of course, absolutely. Do you want to speak to that, or?
No, they are, but like everything else, it is a process. How much do you tell, how much do you not tell? I think we've got a pretty good relationship, and we're improving it.
Thank you, Admiral. Appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a number of friends who live in St. Mary's County. As a matter of fact, I started my teaching career in Calvert County. Is it Calvert or Calvert? I don't know what it is, but anyhow, it was a wonderful experience. Talk to us just a little bit about how you all are handling the problem of transportation. That's a tremendous problem when I go down to St. Mary's County. Are you all addressing that?
Yes, we are. It's a thorny problem. What we have to do is raise money, really, to provide a transportation fund.
So that's not a part of this budget?
It is not. It is not.
You don't see that as a critical issue?
Well, we'd certainly love to have it. I mean, that would be a wonderful thing to have. It's, for whatever reason, it is not in this budget. What we're doing is looking at some models from elsewhere in the state as well as nationwide for places that have been successful in doing this. How do you make those, where do you get those funds? How do you make them available? What kind of criteria do you use? And so we will get there. It's a major focus for this year. I'm happy to report back to you on how we do it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a fur distance. I mean, that's one of our challenges with visitation, as you well know. I mean, even if we compare ourselves to Solomon's Island and Anne Marie's Garden, it's getting over that last bridge and then coming that next 20 minutes down to St. Mary's City can be a challenge, particularly if you've got kids in the car. Are we there yet? So, we're all too familiar with that dynamic.
Yes, are they at one point in time, they were talking about expanding the base there. Is that happening? That probably will be a contributing factor to your transportation problem.
I don't think it's going to happen, especially as what's been going on over the last couple weeks. So it won't expand. We're trying to keep the base what it is, and we're on pretty solid ground to keep the base. But I want to address the attendance. I think we all have the same thing. We have the Maryland State Stadium Authority is going through our place right now, looking at ideas to increase hotel, conference center. And I'm hoping transportation will be part of their study to see what we could do that. So we'll make sure we include that with them.
I know that.
And
You all are not the extension of 210. No, you're not. You have nothing to do with 210.
No.
That's Waldorf.
Yeah.
Yes, that's Charles County.
Yeah, the other challenge we have with transportation, to be honest, is we're a big park, 835 acres, disparate displays, living history components all over that property. It's very difficult for people to get around it. That's another element that, along with the long-distance transportation to get people to the site, we have to move hard on getting people around the site without having them get in their cars at every whip stitch and move around to the next spot. So that's another element that we have to address and are working hard on.
Yes, I would think so. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the MSDE Aid to Education. Dr. Carrie Wright is here. Laura Hyde is our budget analyst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the Aid to Education analysis for the Maryland State Department of Education. So starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, the fiscal 2026 budget for Aid to Education increases by $590 million, or 5.8%, to $10.7 billion. Turning to page 6, Exhibit 1, this shows the English and Language Arts MCAP scores for the past 3 school years, which indicate that although ELA scores have improved since spring 2022, with the exception of grade 10, all grade levels continue to have a majority of students scoring at a beginning or a developing level of achievement. A similar pattern can be seen for math scores on page 8 in Exhibit 2, with all grade levels, again, continuing to have a majority of students scoring at beginning or developing level of achievement. Exhibit 3 on page 9 provides a comparison of MCAP scores in ELA and mathematics for grades 3 through 8, which shows that more students scored proficient or distinguished in ELA than mathematics at each grade level. The bold language on page 10 asks MSD to comment on assessment performance, recommendations of the assessment task force, and the rationale for new assessments. At the bottom of page 10, under the heading Closeout, the bold language asks MSDE to comment on continued high encumbrances for each year. Exhibits 4 through 9 on pages 12 through 19 discuss the fiscal 2026 budget as introduced, changes from the fiscal 2025 budget, allocations for major state aid, enrollment, and provisions introduced in the BRFA. The bold language on page 21 is a DLS recommendation to shift 100% of the fiscal 2026 increase in the state share of the teacher retirement costs to local jurisdictions. Now we're moving to the issue section on page 22. So at the start, this is issue 1, which discusses the governor's fiscal 2026 budget plan as introduced in Senate Bill 429 and House Bill 504. Exhibit 10 shows the proposed changes in the target per pupil foundation amount for collaborative time, which results in an approximately $1.8 billion decrease across 6 programs from fiscal 2026 to 2030, contingent on the passage of this legislation. Because the seed school was not included in these proposed changes, DLS recommends aligning seed school funding with the governor's proposed budget plan. Turning to page 23, Exhibit 11, this shows that the proposed changes in this budget plan to the concentration of poverty program would result in approximate decrease of $664 million from fiscal 27 through fiscal 2030 due to a pause in the proportion of the per pupil grant amounts received by eligible schools. Turning to page 24, Exhibit 12 shows that the budget plan proposes 8 new programs eligible for Blueprint funds that receive $75.9 million in the fiscal 2026 budget. The bold language on page 25 notes that 2 programs, Grow Your Own Educators and the Academic Excellence Fund, appear to be duplicative to other LEA professional development programming, and DLS recommends reductions to those allowances. The bold language also asked MSDE to comment on the projected costs and the number of personnel needed for administration of these new Blueprint programs proposed in the legislation. On pages 26 through 28, Exhibits 13 and 14 show the distribution of Blueprint funds by agency and program. On page 29, Exhibit 15 provides the Blueprint revenue outlook, which indicates that with changes contingent on the passage of this budget plan and the BRFA, Blueprint program costs are covered through fiscal 2027, with $1.1 billion in general funds needed starting in fiscal 2028. Turning to page 31, Issue 2, Non-Public Placements, Exhibit 16 shows expenditures for this program, which exceeded the allowance in fiscal 2024 and 2025. The fiscal 2026 allowance in the budget totals $172.8 million, of which $25 million is contingent on the enactment of the BRFA provision to phase in a change to the state local cost share over 2 years. If that proposal is passed, the allowance for the program in fiscal 2026 would total $147 million. The bold language asks MSDE to comment on the prior year overspending. Turning to page 33, Issue 3, Autism Waiver. Exhibit 17 shows autism waiver enrollment and costs for implementation of the End-to-Wait Acts of 2022 and 2023, which were intended to move approximately 1,500 individuals off the autism waiver waitlist. The program received $30 million in the dedicated purpose account in fiscal 2023, which continues to be expended. In fiscal 2026, the allowance of $58.7 million supports 2,065 slots, which is 885 slots less than MSD's target enrollment of 2,950 individuals for this year. The bold language on page 32 asked MSD to comment on current expenditures and discuss the number of slots the allowance will be able to support in fiscal 2026. On the bottom of page 33 is issue 4 on enrollment and program counts. In a 2024 JCR report on free and reduced price meal student counts for the compensatory education program, MSDE reported that an audit of these data revealed an undercount in Dorchester County's enrollment by 43 students, which should have resulted in $205,000 in additional funding for the county in fiscal 2025. MSD also reported that Baltimore City continues to submit a district level instead of a school level community eligibility percentage, which potentially impacts their CPG funding. The bold language on page 35 asks MSD to comment on these and other concerns regarding FRPM enrollment. In this same issue on page 36, Exhibit 18 examines differences between the new expanded college and career readiness standard and the interim standard, which may impact funding for the program. The bold language on the top of page 37 asks MSDE to comment on the expanded CCR standard, what steps MSDEs and LEAs are taking to ensure that Maryland students are college and career ready by the end of grade 12. The last part of this issue starts on page 38 in Exhibit 19, which shows the distribution of national board certified teachers by LEA. In fiscal 2025, 97% of NBC teachers taught in a non-low performing school and 3% taught in a low performing school. Additionally, 16 LEAs reported no NBC teacher in a low performing school. The bold language on page 39 asks MSD to comment on these concerns. On pages 40 and 41 is issue 5, LEA federal stimulus funding. Exhibits 20 and 21 show funding for both ESSER and relief grants by LEA. The bold language on page 41 asks MSD to provide updated information on ESSER funding through the end of calendar 2024, including a breakout by expenditure type. The recommended actions for this agency and budget start on page 43. And the remaining pages include appendices and detailed changes for all programs from fiscal 2025 to 2026. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
That's a lot.
Try to
That
make
is
it
a lot.
concise for you.
Dr. Wright, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Carrie Wright, State Superintendent of Schools. With me today is Christian Chulor, who's the Deputy State Superintendent for Operations and Finance, and Donna Gunning, who's the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Finance. And once again, I want to thank Laura for her hard work and her partnership with us. It's much appreciated. So thank you, Laura. As we begin, I'd like to share an update on how the department under my leadership is improving education for all children in the state, and then I will respond to the programmatic issues in the analysis. Since we met this time last year, the department, with guidance from the State Board of Education and in collaboration with the Accountability and Implementation Board, has been extremely busy implementing policies designed to ensure all students are able to graduate high school, college, and career ready. As I shared with you last year, the Maryland State Board of Education adopted a resolution to have Maryland among the top 10 in the nation in reading and math on NAEP by 2027. In 2013, Maryland was among the top 2 highest performing states. By 2022, Maryland was ranked 40th. We have made significant investments in the science of reading and math through strategic philanthropic partnerships. Last spring, I finalized a partnership with the IBIS Group and the AIM Institute, as well as SUNY State of New York, to offer micro-credentialing programs in the science of reading that provides high-quality professional learning. Over 5,000 teachers and administrators have participated to date. Last spring, I also finalized a partnership with Arnold Ventures to bring math tutoring to middle schoolers and to provide professional development for teachers. These investments, along with the hard work of our teachers across the state, are starting to show results. In 2024, NAEP, or the Nation's Report Card, the results for 4th and 8th grade reading for math, 4th and 8th grade for Maryland show real progress for reading and just modest progress in math. 4th grade reading scores are now 20th in the nation, up from 40th in 2022. However, our low-income students are ranked 43rd, so we have much more work to do. Under Managing for Results, the analysis noted that, quote, more students score proficient or distinguished in English language arts compared to mathematics. MSDE was asked to comment on the task force recommendations, including current issues with the MCAP, or our statewide assessment, timeline and costs associated with the design, development, and implementation of a new state assessment, and reasons for changing assessments after only a limited time under the current assessment. Since the MCAP assessments were first introduced, there have been growing questions and concerns about the technical soundness of this assessment and their alignment to the state accountability system. In February 2024, MSDE announced the formation of a task force to examine the state's assessment and accountability systems and to strengthen the connection between school ratings and student achievement. Facilitated by the National Center for the Improvement of Educational Assessment, or more commonly known as the Center for Assessment, the task force discussed key aspects of assignment design and implementation and offered several recommendations for improvement to the current state assessment program. Broadly, Recommendations included guaranteeing accessibility and fairness to a broad range of learners, securing a universally designed suite of assessments for consistency across grade levels and content areas, and ensuring that the total test length is no longer than necessary to provide valid, reliable, and useful scores. The members of this task force included state and local K-12 leaders, higher education leaders, teachers, and PTA members. The task force presented their final report with recommendations and implementation guidelines to the State Board, and that report was accepted on December 3rd, 2024. Some of the recommendations included adopting an appropriate growth measure, establishing common performance level indicators, overhauling the assessment system, and educating the community on how better to understand assessment and student progress. MSDE was assisted in drafting the new assessment RFP by its Technical Advisory Committee, which provided objective and expert evaluation about assessment vendors on psychometric and related technical considerations. This guidance will help create a common assessment system that can provide reliable results to inform valid instructional and accountability decisions. It is anticipated that a contract award recommendation will go to the Board of Public Works for approval in summer 2025, and generally expect the new assessment system to be less costly. On October 22nd, 2024, the State Board of Education adopted a comprehensive pre-K through grade 3 literacy policy after a rigorous review and over 8,000 pieces of stakeholder feedback. A new mathematics policy with a goal to increase math proficiency is being developed and reviewed. I firmly believe that all kids are math kids, and the new policy will help give all kids the ability to hone their skill. The stakeholder engagement, public comments, and the LEA engagement is still continuing this spring. I would next like to talk about the teacher shortage in the state of Maryland and Grow Your Own programs. Maryland, like the rest of the nation, faces a teacher shortage. We estimate that to fully realize the potential of the blueprint, the state needs between 12 to 15,000 new teachers. There are currently over 6,000 conditionally certified teachers in the state. Maryland, MSDE, in conjunction with AIB, has been working on school leadership training. Recruitment and retention and increasing educator pipeline is critical for the state to even begin to make a dent in these deficiencies. Grow Your Own programs are focused on recruiting and preparing community-based candidates to teach in their local schools. These programs increase retention and promote strong connections between teachers and the students and families they serve. The Grow Your Own Educators Program, established in Chapters 227 and 228 of 2024, has not been funded. The legislation provided the governor flexibility to include this in his annual budget, and this new program will provide the design flexibility needed to work with local communities and an on-the-job training and opportunities to earn and learn. Maryland must invest in teacher recruitment initiatives and flexible Grow Your Own teacher prep programs to ensure Maryland students have access to diverse and highly qualified teachers. Now I'd like to talk about
Can I just ask you a quick question? Do we have any way of knowing, like, how many students are in place at, like, Maryland, Towson?
Yes, I can get that data for you.
Yeah, I'm just
Those
curious to
numbers,
see how many
yeah.
of our own
Yeah.
we're bringing out. I know we have to get a lot from other states, but
We are an import state. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We import more teachers than we produce internally. And those numbers nationally, even in educator programs nationally, have been declining. But we can get you that per university.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Happy to. Happy to. I want to talk a little about the training for the leaders in the Leadership Academy. Between January 16th and the 19th, we brought together almost 900 school-based leaders in 5 different locations across the state as part of the Blueprint Training for Leaders program. And this work will continue over the next few months. But I want to emphasize that the Maryland Leadership Academy is a completely different program than the Blueprint Training for Leaders program that is in the Blueprint. The Training for Leaders program, which is in the Blueprint, is geared towards system-level leaders like local superintendents, school board members, and chief academic officers. Since we know effective school leadership drives teacher retention and student outcomes, the Maryland Leadership Academy, which we are proposing, focuses on training and mentoring our existing and future leaders across the state, especially in the neediest schools, with a focus on instructional leadership and professional learning and teacher retention. Each participant would also receive a mentor who is an experienced leader to provide guidance and mentorship throughout the academy. But we are also focusing on our current teachers. We know that the job of a teacher has never been more challenging than it is today. One-time teacher workshops typically fail to achieve their goals. Instead, we've seen, and research supports, that strong, non-evaluative instructional coaching makes the biggest impact on a teacher's practice. When teachers have access to an effective coach, they are engaged in a process that is not top-down, but rather one that values their expertise and guides them in integrating the best practices. This process has lasting effects not only on their current students, but on every group of students they teach in the future. Because when teachers feel supported and developed by a coach, they stay in the profession. Senate Bill 429, House Bill 504 would establish the Academic Excellence Program. This identifies a cadre of state instructional coaches who remain employees of the local school systems and spend their time coaching teachers in schools. State instructional coaches engage in training alongside existing LEA coaches, and they are empowered to work together and share resources. When I implemented this kind of state coaches program before, national experts called it a bold move and a critical move, and it was. Instructional coaching varies widely across our districts, despite clear research on what makes coaching effective. This initiative allows us to set a statewide standard for excellence in teacher support. The ways we develop our teachers matter, and instructional coaching is the key. We've also been asked to comment on the reasons for the expanded CCR standard and what steps the department and LEAs are taking to ensure that all Maryland students are college and career ready by the end of grade 12. As required in the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, the State Board of Education conducted an empirical study of the CCR standard. The study recommended that Maryland revise its CCR standard to assess CCR more accurately and equitably, and to provide multiple measures for students to demonstrate college and career readiness, such as including a GPA measure. MSD supports LEAs and students in a number of avenues, including a CCR supports development guideline, menus for best practices to inform LEAs how to create plans to address each student's academic skills and needs. Additionally, MSDE facilitates professional learning for educators to align their interventions with graduation plans and supports LEAs to effectively implement multi-tiered systems of support. I want to reiterate, if we want to see both short and long-term gains in student outcomes, the Academic Excellence Program needs to be fully funded. I hope this helps you see how committed we all are to ensuring that all of our students can be successful. And now I'm going to turn it over to Krishna Chulur and Donna Gunning to share the department's fiscal response to your analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Good morning, Madam. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I also would like to extend my sincere gratitude and say thank you for your hard work and commitment to education. And thanks once again to Ms. Laura Hyde for her thorough analysis and coordination with MSDE. MSDE has submitted the detailed responses to the questions in the analysis, and I'm going to go over some of the highlights. As a follow-up to the testimony provided by Dr. Wright, the department concurs with DLS recommendation to adopt a committee narrative resulting a report on MCAP scores and the LEA progress on remediation of COVID-19 related learning losses. Dr. Wright also provided detailed information regarding the Grow Your Own, Leadership Academy, and Academic Excellence Program. MSDE respectfully disagrees with the DLS recommendations to reduce the proposed funding for these programs. Similarly, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the proposed cut to seats budget and concurs with governor's allowance. MSDE was asked to comment on the projected administrative costs and the number of personnel needed for the MSDE headquarters budget for the administration of the new blueprint programs proposed in Senate Bill 429, House Bill 504. The administrative costs included in The said bills for MSDE for the community school program will support robust learning opportunities, on-the-ground implementation support, technical assistance, bringing in national experts to provide tiered support in implementing best practices, support a multi-year evaluation of the program. Finally, the funds provide additional staffing for additional positions for MSDE's current two-position staff working with the community schools. The additional positions will manage the work of the evaluation and the technical assistance partners and will enable the department to provide differential support across all LEAs. Next, MSDE was asked to comment on why the non-public placement program overspending in the fiscal year 2024 was not reported to the comptroller as required. Due to the continued uncertainty in funding, DLS recommends that MSDE continue to submit a closeout report for this program. Non-public placement program is a current year funded program that is fully reconciled by the fall. As such, the actual expenditures for the program in a given fiscal year is not known by the year-end close. In fiscal year 2024, the department obligated entire $145.6 million NPP appropriation, which did not require reporting to the comptroller. It is important to note that any reconciling expenditures are recorded in the current fiscal year, but paid against a prior fiscal year appropriation. As a result, looking only at the fiscal year expenditures likely includes expenditures from the prior year as well. Department's written response includes details of the projected cost for the autism waiver program. Department will be able to serve 1,914 slots consistently in fiscal year 2026. As participants vacate the program, the slot will be filled from the waiting list, and MSDE is happy to provide an update on the program as recommended by DLS. DLS analysis asked MSDE to respond to 3 items regarding free and reduced meal program and related counts. Number 1, department was unable to repurpose available appropriation to provide additional compensatory education funding to Dorchester County. Regarding the Baltimore City CEP numbers, through the Enough Act of 2024, the Governor's Office of Children is required to submit a report on the neighborhood indicators of poverty that includes different models used to calculate indicators of poverty by October 1, 2025. The AIB is required to submit a methodological recommendation by December 1, 2025. Based on these ongoing work, and since Baltimore City serves some of the neediest students in the state, department made the decision to accept the system-level poverty data. The department's audit team has included the blueprint programs into its standard major state aid audit program. As a result of these additional programs, the team is not able to visit 6 LEAs in a year. The team will visit LEAs once every 3 years, and all 3 years of enrollment and program activities are included in the tri-annual audit. Department's written response provides detailed explanation for the variability of NBC teachers across the state. Department concurs with the DLS recommendation that MSDE submit a report on FRPM, CCR, and NBC teacher enrollment and counts addressing these concerns outlined in the analysis. MSDE concurs with DLS recommendation to provide updated information on ESSER funding through the end of calendar 2024, including a breakout by expenditure type. Due to the remaining balance for Relief Act expenditures, DLS recommends committee narrative for LEA final reports on program funding. We respect legislature's request. Finally, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to amend a provision to shift 100% of the fiscal 2026 increase in the state share of teachers' retirement system costs to local jurisdiction rather than 50%. The department concurs with the governor's allowance. With that, we stand ready for your questions.
Okay, any questions? Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning.
Good morning.
It's, yes, it's still good, or it's a good afternoon now. We've been here a little while. Okay. Couple questions. First thing I'd like to tell you is in this committee, We have definitely discussed the challenges with the MCAP test or evaluation or assessment, however, whatever is the correct term.
Assessment.
But, okay, assessment. And I just wanted to recognize MSDE and say thank you very much for what you're moving forward, because I don't think it made any sense when we were looking at accountability to go back to all the time and effort that we have put on our school systems. We want to be able to look forward. And my question resulting this is, are we going to be able to look not only to a county, but to a school, to a classroom, so that we can determine what is positive, what is happening, versus what is not?
So thank you for your question and thank you for your compliment. You will be able to get it at the district level and at the information at the school level. Typically, state assessments do not produce information around individual class level because it's really a school effort. I mean, if that's the way to look at it. And so you will get all the teachers that are assessing those students. It will be aggregated up to the school level, and then all of the schools get aggregated up to the district level. But the new accountability system that we're working on is going to be much cleaner, much clearer, much more transparent. If I've heard from one superintendent, I've heard from all 24. They want a system that, given all of the inputs into the system, even before the department publishes the results, they could calculate their own accountability measures at the local level. And that's kind of what we are committing to do. I do believe accountability drives behavior. And so we want to make sure that our accountability system is robust and it is making people pay attention to what is actually happening in schools. And that's where we're coming from.
I appreciate your response. That's been a concern of quite a few of us since the blueprint started. And we spent $100 million in trying to develop this assessment, and now we know that didn't work the way it was intended. So we've got to make sure that we make sure that the process that we're doing is accountable, so we know it's working.
That's exactly right.
Everybody's willing to spend money if we just know it's working. But the next thing that I was going to ask you about was, I come from a peninsula in southern Maryland, St. Mary's County, and it's very important for us to grow our own teachers, right? And I appreciate the fact that you're talking about that and you're looking at that. But, sometimes we don't always, look at places that have been successful. And, with our higher education center, and if you walk around in our schools, you will see that the majority of our teachers are from our school system. They grew up there, right? We taught them through our higher education, and they then retained there. It's why we have the highest teacher retention. So I appreciate you doing that. I would just hope that you're willing to look at some of the school systems that have high teacher retention in that regard, that have grown their own as you develop your new program.
Absolutely. We want to learn from the best.
Well, thank you very, very much. I'll relay that to Scott Smith, that he might be the best.
Yes, indeed. You can tell him I said that.
Okay. So, and now I wanted to ask you just a couple questions, and I appreciate you and your earnest to talk about your academy, when we're going to grow the best teachers and we're going to grow the best systems. Is there any system or any part of that is being built in going to revolve around budgeting?
Are you talking about the training that's going to be involved?
The training.
Oh,
yes.
absolutely. I think that's part of what you train with the leadership training. That's a critical part. Having been a school-based administrator, I mean, I was lucky that I had been mentored by some of the best where budgeting was concerned. So that is definitely going to be a theme that goes through with when we're training current and aspiring administrators, as to how do you plan for a budget, how do you manage a budget, and how do you make sure you don't go over the budget.
So we saw, Wednesday, you and I we were all part of that very long process. And we saw that when we talked about unencumbered funds, right, there are hundreds of millions of dollars of unencumbered funds in state
balances.
in balances, unfunded, unfunded.
The fund balances that they
Yes,
have,
and their
yes.
fund
Yes.
balances that are not their reserves, right? We know that people have got to keep reserves. I mean, just as a winter we just had with snow, or if there's healthcare issues, things like that, because they're self-funded. I understand that, but when I see that people have nearly $100 million in a school system, right? Clearly, it shows to me that we have over budgeted. We are talking about taxpayer money, and that it is important that when we move forward, that as we look at things that MSD is requiring, AIB is requiring, that we should have training and we should have financial experts, because the businesses, each county is a Fortune 500 company when we look at how many hundreds of millions of dollars their budgets are. Right? And I think that that's pretty simple to say we need 24 experts so that we're not over budgeting, so that we're not doing things. We are using, as stewards of the taxpayers' money, we are doing it as efficiently and as practically as possible, and that we are spending it down to every last dollar and making the best benefit, because I think that would give us much more credibility when we talk about education. And I would just like your response on what you think about the fact of us managing our school systems and their budgets just like they're a business, because in all seriousness, they're the future of Maryland. They are our future leaders, and we need to manage it like a business.
Well, and I think that's really the role of the local school boards in conjunction with the superintendents. I mean, I've worked in how many different systems here in Maryland, and each one had its own local board that was very actively involved in the management and expenses that the superintendent at the time was recommending. And so I'm in agreement with you. That's one of the reasons I think that as we start training those that are going to be taking the place of future administrators, because right now I think one of the stats that I said on the last week was since before the pandemic, 5 years later, we only have 1 in 3 of the principals in place that started out there. So that shows you the turnover. So having an academy, a leadership academy that trains and brings up not only existing people, but the people that want to become principals, that's a skill set that you need to learn, is how to manage a budget, how to develop a budget, and how to manage a budget, and how to get the outcomes that you need in terms of student outcomes and teacher retention within that budget. So I am a firm believer that we all have to be accountable. I hold myself accountable. I've been given a budget by this legislature, every year, and I've got to be accountable for it. So our superintendents, I think, are aware that they need to be accountable for it, and local boards are also involved in that decision making.
So I thank you, Mr. Chair, for the ability to ask the questions. I will tell you that I think that this is a much bigger question than just putting it back to the local boards. I think this is an issue where the state and our leadership needs to provide clear guidance on what we are requiring when it comes to financial, the financial stewardship, right, of the taxpayers' money. We need to make sure we're doing the right thing with that money.
Could not agree with you more. Could
Okay.
not agree with you more on that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Benson.
Yeah, I'm going to do this. Hopefully, I'm going to have to sit down to talk with you all about the teachers who maintain the national board standard. But what we're finding is that they're not placed in schools where the need is the greatest. I'm just wondering, I would like for you all to put that somewhere on your radar screen as to what we can do to encourage administrators and superintendents to place those highly certified teachers in schools, in classrooms where the need is the greatest. I'm not sure that is what's happening. And the second thing has to do with, when we look at the blueprint, one of the pieces that's, for me, that's kind of missing is the parental engagement. And I'm going to come and sit down to talk with you.
Absolutely, happy to.
About the parental engagement piece for the schools, because I don't think that in schools, as a former administrator, in schools where parents are involved in their children's education, it makes a difference.
It does.
So those two areas are areas that I'm very, very concerned about. And the third has to do with the children that are disabled, the autistic children and the disabled, the children that are the children that are disabled, or families that having to deal with children who have disabilities. I think our school system as a whole needs to take a look at how we could better assist those families and how can we assist the schools when it comes to dealing with children who have disabilities. But I want to make those are three very important points.
Yeah.
But I want
Unfortunately, Senator Benson,
to talk to you about
Sure.
that.
you and I have talked many times about the fact that we can't legislate parent involvement, though it would be wonderful if we could, because that is such a huge key to a child's success in school, but you can't force parents to do that. So that's,
And even with the General Assembly's incentives around the National Board Certification, I mean, the teachers that get the National Board Certification automatically get a $10,000 add-on to their salary. And if they go to a low-performing school, Senator Benson, they get an additional $7,000. But unfortunately, right now, we only have about, I'm going to say between 5 and 8% is what memory serves of our NBCs in our lowest performing schools. And of all of our NBCs, only 19% are people of color. So it is a concern on both parts. I agree with you.
Thank you.
thank you. Dr. Wright, I just have two questions. One, I don't know if you can answer today. I might just have to have you get back to me on it. But Dorchester County has not received $200,000 for their comp ed.
Do you want to answer that? Or?
I can.
Okay.
They have not.
There you go.
So to clarify, they have not. Dorchester has not received that additional funding.
Okay. So what is the reason for that?
The reason for that is that when we were not able to move available appropriation around in order to increase the compensatory ed program to provide that funding for Dorchester County. The feeling at the time was that this occurred well after the implementation of the budget and any supplemental budgets, and the decision was to not do that. And we, as much as you all have concerns about student counts and the free and reduced price meals and such programs, we do too, because we're the ones who are collecting that.
Sure.
And sometimes those are, they're hard to handle, but we also have to get the counts right. So
Okay.
it's a balancing act.
Do you want to follow up with this later? Yeah, and we just need to have a formal response on that because they're asking for their funding.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And also, Dr. Wright.
Sure.
The assessment system, or assessment system.
Assessment system? Yes, ma'am.
If we've only been using the current assessment system for 3 years, is that correct?
I think it's been longer than that.
Is it really necessary to move to a new assessment system, is my question.
There is, I've got a lot of concerns about our current system.
Okay.
And I've got a lot of concerns about our current accountability system. And that's the reason I put that task force together. And when you get, that was a large group, probably about 25 to 30 people that worked over a 7-month period of time and nobody missed a meeting. You've got the field also questioning the validity and reliability of the assessment. It's been strange to me. We've got a 4-level system. With 4 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. And typically when you administer an assessment and you produce results based on those 4 levels. So, advanced, proficient, et cetera.
Right.
Maryland, for whatever reason, made a decision in one year, and I can get that year too, you have to back it up in my head, to administer it and produce 4 levels worth of levels of performance. Then the next year collapsed it to 3 levels of performance, and then the next year went back to 4 levels of performance. And so there's been a lot of questions that I have started to raise around that. Our data have been flat for years and showing no growth whatsoever, and which gets back to your accountability system and using a growth measure that really does accurately measure growth. The growth measure that we have is very small. Part of our statute is also, part of the assessment, the accountability system is in statute. I would strongly recommend that we take a look at that. And there's some things that are very prescriptive. For example, no more than 65% of the accountability system can count for academics. That 65% is one of the lowest in the nation. And I think that MSDE, now that we have a technical advisory committee in place, every state's supposed to have a technical advisory committee. It's a group of nationally known psychometricians that oversee all of this work. Maryland has not had a technical advisory committee in play in probably 10 years, maybe. And so we now have a technical advisory committee, very strong technical advisory committee, to oversee all of this work. So I have a lot of questions still about decision-making around the changes that were made inside the assessment system, particularly when you don't have a technical advisory committee overseeing that work and saying, you're good to go, or no, that is not the way we do things. So I convened that group to really kind of confirm, where I was thinking. And lo and behold, I mean, the people in the room were universal in their feelings around the assessment system as well as the accountability system. So the report that they've produced in December is what's guiding our work now moving forward in terms of the development of a new assessment system. The other thing that's been a concern of mine, we must have at least 4 different vendors that we're using for this assessment system, and anytime you keep using multiple vendors, your cost is going to go up. So we are also putting in our RFP, we're asking for a vendor to come in and do that. So we do really anticipate some of the costs to go down.
Okay. As we go along, if you could just kind of keep us up to date so that when there are questions asked of us as to why you're doing that, we've got the answers.
Yes, ma'am. Happy to.
Okay. I appreciate it. Okay. Any other questions? Senator Bailey, you got your finger on the button over there.
I did. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate this new assessment. You're looking at the assessment, but it brought me back to a question when you brought up, I think when you said we were flat and hadn't seen an interest, that's the NAEP.
No, that's your statewide assessments. If you go back and look over for at least the past 5 to 6 years, we have literally hovered between 43 to 45 to 44 to 45 to 47 to 45. It's just been flat. And math is even worse. Math, we are right now at a 27% proficiency rate in mathematics. No, that's the state. The national assessment, we rebounded from 22 to 24 in 4th grade. We did come back from 40th in the nation to 20th, but we've still got a long way to go. And particularly if you start disaggregating it, that's why I mentioned about our low-income students. Our low-income students are ranked 43rd in the nation nationally. So we've got a lot of work to do, but it's two different assessments. The national assessment is administered to every state in the nation in the same identical way in 4th and 8th grade every 2 years in reading and in math. Your statewide assessments are administered every spring to grades 3 through 8, and then again in high school in English and science and math.
Is the NAEP, can we track that back to a district and back to a
No,
school?
sir. That's the one thing that NAEP does not do. NAEP, which I think is the beauty of NAEP, because it will tell you, we'll get a letter that says, we're coming into Maryland, here are the districts that we're coming into, and they don't come into all of them. Here are the schools we're coming into, and here's the children we want to assess. And what the beauty of NAEP is that the children that they assess mirror the demographics of the state. So if you've got 40% of this, or 10% of this, or 12% of students with disabilities, whatever it is, then how they select those children mirrors those demographics. And so then, and the other part that I love is that they come in and administer the test, they take back the test, they grade the test, and they produce the results. So it's hands off from the state, and it's an objective contractor, if you will, coming in to administer this assessment. So that's the reason it's so important, because now we can look at ourselves and say, where are we compared to our neighbors? Where are we compared to people across the nation? And to think that in 2013, Maryland was number 2 in the nation on NAEP, to have dropped to 40th in 2022, and thank goodness in reading we've rebounded to 20, but inside that then you've got to make sure that all students are seeing growth, not just being hidden in the aggregate.
Thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome.
I greatly appreciate it. It's just very important to me when people are looking that, like many of my friends, they look to move to an area. Mm-hmm. They want to know what their schools are doing.
That's exactly right.
Right? It drives our economy knowing that we have good schools. But from where I sit, I want to make sure that the schools that I represent or how they are doing, mm-hmm. how they are doing against everybody else.
Sure.
Right? We want to make sure to have that assessment so that I can say, and that's just something that I think is needed.
Absolutely, critical. It's critical. I agree with you.
It's critical, and we
Yep.
need to be moving in that direction.
Totally agree.
So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But we honestly care about all the kids in the state,
Yes, we do.
no matter where we're from.
There is no doubt about it. Care about every child. Thank you very much.
He meant to say that before he said
meant
the
to
other
say
part.
I think that does it for us. I don't
Okay.
think there's any more questions. So, yeah, thank you and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Still have Ellie Mitchell. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a real quick.
Okay, come on up.
I know I get 2 minutes, right? Good afternoon, Chair King and members of the committee. I'm Ellie Mitchell. I'm the director of the Maryland Out of School Time Network. We also are the backbone for the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools, and I today am representing the Blueprint Coalition in my remarks. I know you've heard a lot of numbers. I just want to provide some critical context around issue 1, the proposed changes to the blueprint spending that's in the SB 429-504 bill. First, collaborative time. As you know, it's part of the per pupil foundation amount set to phase in next year, gradually increasing over 8 years to $1,527 by 2033. The proposed 4-year pause means that the focus has been on cuts over the next 4 years, but the impact extends far beyond that. We won't just lose 4 years, we'll be playing catch up until 2037. A kindergartner starting next year will receive $6,448 less in promised funding by the time they graduate. You can multiply that by nearly 890,000 students, and it's clear that this isn't really a pause. It's a systemic defunding of public education. The freeze on concentration of poverty dollars adds insult to injury because it compounds with our most vulnerable populations, also impacted by that per pupil cut.
And second, the numbers you've heard have largely focused on the savings to the state, but that's only part of the picture. State and local funding are linked, as you know, so cutting the per pupil funding amount lowers the minimum required local contribution, and further reducing resources for students, sometimes doubling the impact. So changing the blueprint formula isn't just shifting state dollars, it's creating ripple effects across school funding at every level. And finally, we're making long-term cuts to education at a time when we don't even know if current funding is truly adequate to meet students' needs, let alone build the world-class schools we envisioned. And so I urge you to consider these cuts very carefully, and thank you for letting me make this comment today.
You can be sure that there is a lot of study going into this. The decisions will not be made lightly.
Thank you.
Thank you.